Welcome to Safety First with Danger Tate. Welcome to Safety First with Danger Tate. I'm Tate, and this is my show where I talk to cool people about the cool things that we do. Our guest today is Mark Singleton. Pew, 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 pew. Mark was the executive director of American Whitewater for 18 years, and he now travels around the country pursuing outdoor activities galore. He has attended more Gauleyfest than most people, and today we're going to hear all about the events and wild stories from Gauleyfest. Mark Singleton, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, pleasure to be here. It's awesome to have this technology to hook us up. So
I know, it's so exciting. Well, Mark, tell us where you're calling from.
Well, I'm actually currently in Teton Valley, which is the Idaho side of Grand Teton National Park, and I'm here for the month of March, just being a dirtbag and skiing as much as I can.
Did you start skiing or paddling first in your life?
Well, actually, I started paddling first.
Okay.
Skiing came pretty much right after that.
And somehow in all of your life's paths, you ended up with American Whitewater, and you ended up being the executive director. Can you just give a little context into how you kind of got linked up with that role?
Yeah, in the early 2000s, American Whitewater was searching for an executive director. I'd been the marketing VP at a large East Coast-based outfitter, Nanahill Outdoor Center, through the 90s actually, and I'd worked with a number of the board members that were board members at American Whitewater at the time. They told me the opportunity was opening up, and I really wasn't that interested in it. I'd heard some challenging stories about where AW was at the time, and kind of just let the opportunity pass. But there was one board member in particular who I'd worked with who was very persuasive, and he just encouraged me to look again. And I said, "Well, look, if this is such a great deal, you're coming with me, and we gotta dig into this thing, because there were some financial challenges,
Okay.
and I needed to understand them better. And I'm not a finance guy, I mean, I know fifth grade math, and if you can't explain it with fifth grade math, the basic addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, then you can't explain it. That's just how it works. I mean, this isn't rocket science." And he was a banker, and anyway, we dug into things. I could, with the information I had, I could kind of see a path forward, and I ended up applying for the job, and I got interviewed at Gauleyfest, right?
What?
So my American Whitewater interview for the ED position happened at Gauleyfest. Now I'll tell you.
When? Like, how in the festivities did that happen?
Yeah. It was a weekend long interview, so they wanted to make sure that I could answer questions, paddle a kayak, and probably drink beer too.
I was gonna say.
I mean, it's the whole package. But anyway, the interview happened at Gauleyfest, and it was, at the time, it was kind of a semi-intense period where there were various people that the board was meeting with. I was just one of them.
Okay.
And the interview itself was it was bizarre. It was just crazy. There was a big long table, and you got to understand Gauleyfest. I'll explain it a little bit better here. It happens at a park that's the regional park for the community of Summersville, which is the local community for the Gauley River, closest big community. And it's a 4-H camp and a bunch of athletic fields. So the 4-H camp has all of these cinder block buildings that look like they came, right out of World War II. They're just cinder block buildings.
Okay.
And hard fluorescent lighting, and a long row of folding tables and chairs where the interview took place. There were like 30 board members there. So on either side of this long row of tables were 30 people, 15 on each side. The guy that was interviewing me at one end of the table facing towards me. I was 15 people deep at the other end of these tables put together. It was like, it's
What?
just, yeah, it was just like set up like a ping pong match, right? And the style of interview that he used was just to barrage me with, with questions, just, question, volley, question, volley. I've heard about this style of interviewing. I'd never experienced it
What kind
before,
of
but
questions was he asking?
they're just very, very basic kind of, what would you do in this situation? What are your accomplishments? What are you, you know,
Did you at least have
what are
a
you like?
microphone, or were you shouting
No,
across the table?
it was just like this.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and the questions would come at me and I'd fire off a response. And it was like the heads of these 30 board members, they were going, looking at the person asking the questions, looking at me, looking at the person, looking at me. I mean, it was just like a ping pong match. Anyway,
And was that
so
your first time attending Gauleyfest? Was for that interview, or had you been in the past?
no, I'd been to Gauleyfest early on, so I kind of knew what the drill was, you
Okay.
know. So when you go to Gauleyfest and you go, okay, this is a dilemma. I'm going for a job interview. Do I wear a button-down shirt or do I just go there with t-shirt and board shorts like I normally would?
What did you decide?
I actually like did a real casual, checkered button-down shirt, just like flannel shirt, and just kept it loose.
Nice.
There were some suits and ties involved, but that wasn't me.
Okay, here's what I'm curious
So
about. If you had 3 words to describe Gauleyfest, could you come up with 3 words?
um yeah, I probably could. I could probably come up with 2 words,
Okay, let's hear
and
them.
those
Even
those
better.
those those 2 words are Grateful Dead show and Olympic Village. Because that's what Gauleyfest is. Gauleyfest is a cross between a Grateful Dead show and the Olympic Village. I mean, it's it's got all the hard charging boaters that come out to paddle the Gauley, and then it's got this whole carnival festival atmosphere thing going on.
And has
So
American Whitewater always hosted it?
no, the way Gauleyfest started is back in the early '80s. There was a proposal to dewater the upper 3 miles of the Gauley River, putting a penstock from the base of the dam down to below Pillow Rock that would put in a hydroelectric project. So the first 3 miles of river would have essentially been dry. Water coming out of the dam would have flowed
Oh.
into the pipe. The pipe would have delivered water down below Pillow Rock to a hydro generating facility. So boaters got together um, and really created this a grassroots campaign that was spearheaded by a group by the name of Citizen for Gauley River. So Citizens for Gauley River was put together by a gentleman by the name of David Brown, and David had a real interesting career in paddle sports. He later became the executive director of America Outdoors, which is the outfitter
Wow.
guide association that really does a lot of lobbying work to protect operations that outfitters have and permits that outfitters have that are really important to the outfitting community. So David at the time was spearheading Citizens for Gauley River. He was also working on a campaign on the Ocoee River in
Mm.
Tennessee to get TVA to continue to release water in the Ocoee. And David had a large footprint in both places. And Gauleyfest was an outcome of this Citizens for Gauley River campaign, which was successful, and the hydroelectric project was beat back. And
Nice.
Gauleyfest was the celebration of the
Oh.
success of this grassroots campaign to push back on the hydro operation, and it was intended to be a one and done deal. We were successful. Let's have a party. We can raise some funds and pay our bills and move on to the next thing. So that's how Gauleyfest started. The first one was in 1984.
Wow.
I attended it. That's
Amazing.
that's how I got introduced to Gauleyfest. But at the
And
time, I was a guide on the Gauley River, and I'd been guiding there for a number of years, so I knew the Gauley, kind of knew that program.
when did Gauleyfest take on such the you used the word carnival characteristics? Like when did
Yeah,
that really kick off?
that was a slow build. You
Okay.
know, it wasn't like a light switch got thrown and all of a sudden it just turned into this thing. And, it was just slow. So after the first one, um, there were a group of folks who had seen the opportunity to rally the paddling community, um, and lobby for additional releases on rivers that were controlled by hydropower operations.
Mhm.
And they became instrumental um, in both the development of AW and in securing releases on a number of rivers, primarily in the Northeast. So rivers like the Moose, the Hudson. These were some of the kind of early success stories for American whitewater coming out of the early to mid 80s. American whitewater had been around since the 50s,
Mm.
producing uh, a journal and putting out safety information and sharing information about about paddling, both kayaking and rafting. Um, and initially, the craft that were used of choice were Army surplus rafts, Grumman canoes, and fold boats. The canvas covered,
Wild.
plywood shell boats of the 50s and early 60s. So if you go back to these old AW journals, they're all on the website, by the way, which is AmericanWhitewater.org.
Oh,
Um, there,
fun.
there's a library tab on the upper right-hand corner. Just kind of click that and go to journals. And I mean, it chronicles the whole development of whitewater paddle sports in the
Wow.
United States. So you can peruse these old journals, and it's an archive that's really quite interesting if you're into geeking out about rivers. Um, so this whole Gauleyfest scene was just a way for folks that were getting into this new arena of um, negotiating for water out of hydropower operations or trying to beat hydropower operations back. It was just a way to raise money. I mean, they needed to fund themselves.
Mhm.
The event was largely um, an opportunity to put together some cash and pay for whatever expenses they were incurring, and what was largely just a volunteer effort. There were no paid staff. It was all done for the
Mhm.
love of rivers. I mean, that's what
Wow.
drove it. It's what
And I feel
continues
like
to drive it.
that's what I was going to say is I feel like that's still, the people that support it are people who love rivers and want to see them continue to be loved, have people find them. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, okay,
absolutely.
correct me if I'm wrong here, but AW hosts 3 different river festivals. The Gauley Fest is one of them. What are the other 2?
Yeah, so we've actually hosted a number of different festivals over the years, but the ones that are continuing that have a really strong following, our Feather Festival, which is in Northern
Oh, right.
California on the Feather River,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yep.
And that's all about gaining water in the Feather through hydropower negotiations and
Mhm.
rewatering a river that was essentially dry for decades, right?
Mhm.
And it's a fantastic river with multiple sections, and Feather River and the festival, they're a big deal to the Northern California paddling community.
Mhm.
So that has a very loyal following. And then Deerfield in Massachusetts, the Deerfield River
Oh.
is another river that again, water came out of hydropower negotiations where paddlers took a lead role, inserted themselves, lobbied for downstream water, and and were able to obtain it. and as a result, there's a thriving kind of outdoor community that is around the Deerfield River, that includes really well-known storied outfitters like Zor Outdoors and their paddling school, and a number of other operations that take place uh, on the Deerfield. So those are kind of the big river festivals. But then there's Gore Fest in Colorado as well,
Oh,
and that
right.
used to,
Okay.
you know, the 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 big draw on Gore Fest used to be a kind of a class five race, but due to challenges with insurance for class five races, that's that's not as much what it is about, but it's a community
Mhm.
gathering to celebrate water in the Colorado River, especially the headwaters reaches of the Colorado. And of course, as you know, everyone's trying to stick their straw in the Colorado River and take their water allocation out. So uh, being an advocate for downstream uses of water, recreational uses of water, and supporting a recreation-based tourism economy in Colorado around the river, it's a big deal. I mean, it's
Yeah.
huge. So it's a very important set of issues. So, you can see that all of these river festivals have this nexus about a river and water in a river. And if the river doesn't have water in it, you don't call it a river anymore. You call it a
Yeah.
ditch.
Yeah. It's been really fun to hear from so many different, people in the river industry and yourself included of all of the wins that the river community has had, and in a large part thanks to AW and all of the work that AW does to send the word out that this is happening. And so I think the festivals are really good for that. What I hear now with Gauleyfest is there's, the total look of like this insane party. And when I think of Gauleyfest, I just can see a hardshell kayaker being thrown off of that rock, or, a raft coming up and trying to like jump onto the rock and like, or dry flip and stuff like that. When did the debauchery at that one spot kind of begin? When did people start throwing people off of rocks?
Well, once again, it was a slow build. Um, so access in the Gauley has always been kind of a long-standing issue, right? Trying to get people to the river, get people out of the river. When I was a guide there in the late 70s and early 80s, um, there was no midstream access, right? It's 23 miles of pretty continuous whitewater, and
Wow.
there was no place to get customers out other than a railroad bridge at Peters Creek with a railroad track. So what we would do in those years was we would um we would actually walk our guests out. So we do say we have a 6 boat trip. There's a guide in each boat. Two guides would walk the guests out. That means we now have 4 guides in 6 boats. The guests walked out to a parking lot that was about a mile down the tracks. It was
Hmm.
it wasn't a hard walk. And then a bus would pick them up and take them back to the meeting place. And so now you've got 4 guides on the lower Gauley, which is another 8 miles of river,
Hmm.
um, with 6 rafts, right? Well, you do the math. You can't get somebody in each boat. So we would double guide a stack of 3 rafts
No, you
down to the
wouldn't.
lower Gauley. Oh yeah, yeah. This
What?
this is how we got boats out of the corridor in the late 70s.
How would
So
your paddle even reach the water?
oh, it didn't. You had to bend over. Um,
Oh my
but
gosh.
you beaner the boats together. You you go 3 deep. You got 2 guides now, each in the stern, and yeah, and you ride the current. You just stay in the current. You know, throw in some directional strokes. It's not like you're able to really build up a lot of forward momentum.
Oh my
And we
gosh.
would paddle. We would paddle those boats out, and you know, then it got to be, well, okay, so how high can we stack them? And I still remember going through Mash, which is one of the larger rapids on the lower Gauley, big, 2 big holes in it.
Uh-huh.
And we tried stacking 4 high, and instead of having the boats beanered and cam strapped together, we just kind of held them as a stack, and we stood on the we stood on the tube of the bottom boat. And we just kind of
What?
used some downward pressure and held on. We hit that first hole, and this whole stack just exploded.
Oh,
And
I'm
both
sure.
both me and the guy that I was with at the time, who was still a lifelong great friend, got slung up into the air. And I can still remember hearing him shout as I'm heading down into the water, "You let go!" so, so there was always this kind of culture, you know, this sense that, you know, it was, you know, it was the Wild West of rafting. I mean,
Yeah.
those years were unstructured, and you know, it was you just had to make things up as you went, because there wasn't a lot of, you know, there weren't a lot of systems in place to manage things. There wasn't a lot of access in place to manage things. Um, so at any rate, you know, that's the way life around the Gauley evolved. And then sometime in the early 80s, a bunch of guides got together and they said, you know, Gauley's a great place to do overnight trips. And it was. We actually ran overnight trips in the late 70s and early 80s. And, you know,
Mhm.
but was before land was carved up down there, and we could basically camp wherever we wanted. And, you know, a guide trip came together, and I think there were probably about 45 people on that initial guide trip, and it was called Gauley Folly. And it was, you know, everybody kicked in. I think we all kicked in like 20 bucks, and 5 of it went to food and 15 of it went to beer. And
Oh
we ended
my
up we
gosh.
ended up on the river for you know, for 3 days, just floating down. And you know, that culture carried over. I mean, it wasn't crazy. You know, it wasn't wild. I mean, you hear the stories, and the stories have all been largely exaggerated, although I try not to do too much of that.
I was gonna
And
say, have they really been exaggerated, or is that truly I feel like Gauleyfest is just
it does have that
insanity
reputation.
from what I've
Yeah,
heard.
yeah. So, you know, the point is, this had been, you know, this is a grassroots event. It's about the river. It's about people. It's about a community that comes together because they want to celebrate the river. They want to be on it. And so those things that you mentioned, you know, the 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 hucking boats off Postage Due at the bottom of Sweets Falls, the sliding boats off of Pillow Rock, and you know, trying to do aerial maneuvers. You know, those things all developed over time as people were thinking about, you know, ways that, you know, that they could experience the Gauley that were um, unique, unusual. Um, you know, certainly squirt boating played a big role in the development of the Gauley, because Gauley is a great river to to stern squirt a longboat, you know, a
Mm,
race legal boat.
mhm.
And you get huge stern squirts because the Yetis are deep and they're powerful, and they just stand you up. And so it's, you know, it's almost the perfect playground for sky cracking, kayaking, looking up at the sky and just being burying your stern. And all of that just kind of added to this mystique around the Gauley River as, you know, this you know, incredible whitewater playground that you could schedule, right? These
Mm,
releases were schedulable. So you knew that, you know, during Gauley season, water would be guaranteed. People could plan on it, you know, months in advance.
mhm.
Outfitters could book trips on it, you know, a year in advance. And it was something that was dependable. So all of that kind of built along the Gauley, and outfitting grew, became, you know, more standardized, more systemized. Outfitters grew with it. Um, and the festival, you know, continued to flourish and grow.
Mhm.
And it was a celebration of American Whitewater's successful outcomes, um, largely in hydropower negotiations, which is this really wonky, crazy thing that's overseen by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, right?
Okay.
And it's something that American Whitewater was able to gain a lot of expertise in. Um, you know, it's kind of the confluence of some early godfathers of the program for representing Whitewater, being at the right place at the right time, knowing the right people, and being
Mm,
able to insert language in the Federal Power Act of 1986 that included equal consideration for downstream use of water. So that equal consideration clause balances upstream use, which would be like lake owner, reservoir operations, marinas on lakes, with
mhm,
downstream use, which would include private paddlers, rafters, outfitters, and that equal consideration clause is something within the Federal Power Act that we've, as American Whitewater, been able to hang our hats on and say, okay,
mm,
we can insert ourselves here. We can represent the interests of downstream water, both for recreation and for ecological reasons, uh, to to try and advocate with utilities to release water in some scheduled way for whitewater recreation. So that's uh, that's one of the things that worked on the Feather and the Deerfield, and I mentioned those
mm.
events earlier.
I
Um,
really appreciate you sharing all that because I think it gives a lot of great context into what is actually going on behind the scenes. And it also opens my eyes to, okay, yeah, Gauley is about way more, and the successes that you have at just that one thing can spiral into so many other successes through legislature that I've never even heard of, nor probably would never hear of if not talking to you. So it's cool to hear about. So I really
yeah,
appreciate that.
it's sorry, it's just a wonky rabbit hole, and
Well, and it
that's
is it's just it's cool to hear the behind the scenes.
yeah.
I do want to hear about, it's a it's a 3-day festival, right? So within those 3 days, every year, what is the one event that you look forward to the most?
For me personally,
Yeah.
the one event that I look forward to the most is being on the river on Saturday morning early and going
Why?
paddling. Oh, just because, the festival is full on. I mean, it's a for staff that work the festival, it's a big deal. It's a major event. You're basically up until 2 in the morning, waking up at 7 o'clock. You're not getting a lot of sleep.
Oh my
Um, it's
gosh.
it's just it it's an endurance event,
Okay.
and being able to balance that with some time on the water is just that that's the part of it that I look forward to. um, and there are things that are going on the river, and that's largely just groups of people getting together, enjoying each other's company. It's not an
Mm,
organized The river time is not organized by American Whitewater. We just take
okay.
advantage of those. We just take advantage of that release schedule and encourage folks to go paddling. So the event is really paddler focused, either rafter, kayaker, hardboater. You choose the craft. It's all about the river. And
How many people attend?
over the course of 3 days, we probably get about 2,500 individuals there for the weekend.
Wow.
So the field and the festival site is just covered in tents.
Yeah.
You know,
Wow.
People are camping there, and this has been another issue with the Gauley, is that sometimes it's just been really hard to find places to camp.
Mm,
So when you have a place where you can go camp that's got food available and entertainment available, and has this great kind of vendor setup where brands are bringing in their gear and showing it, and there's used equipment for sale. There's even vendors are selling their blems. There's apparel. I mean, it's just it is this kind of carnival atmosphere with camping, and
wow.
it just makes it really easy to kind of go in, set up, go paddling, and then have a place where you can hang out and party. And
Wow.
you can imagine, look, you got 2,500 class 4 boaters, right? Of all kinds,
Yeah.
and they're stoked because they've just been on the river, and
Yeah.
they bring that stoke back to Gauleyfest,
What's the
and you
best costume you've ever seen?
and you can't contain it. You just can't contain it. I mean, you throw the lights on this event, and whatever's going to happen just happens, right? And my, as Ironically, as the adult that had to be in charge for many years,
Uh-huh.
my main concern was just don't let anyone get really hurt. And I
Yeah.
and I can say that we never had anyone get really hurt.
Okay,
Um,
way to go.
so, so that part of it worked. I mean, there are all sorts of things that, that happen at Gauleyfest that should probably stay at Gauleyfest.
Very
But there
fair.
but there are a few that are just really notable,
Okay,
you know.
let's hear them.
So, there's like I said earlier, this is a 4-H camp,
Yeah.
right? And as you can imagine, a 4-H camp, it's got a dining hall, and the 4-H ladies use that dining hall to set up a boat or dinner. And the dining hall has a big bell in front of it that's on a metal post, right?
Mhm.
And and this became kind of a long term thing, where initially there was a group of cheerleaders that came out of Morgantown, West Virginia, where there's a big university, and they figured that they could build a human pyramid, right? And just ring the crap out of this bell, right? And they did. And then subsequently, they went around all night trying to pimp all of these young, kind of, you know, beefed up class 4 boaters to climbing the damn pole and ringing the bell, saying they rang the bell. Can you ring the bell?
Oh,
So all
no.
night long, this damn bell is just clanging and clanging and clanging, right? And folks are trying to get some sleep. I mean, it's three
Uh-huh.
o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, and this
Oh
bell's
my
still damn ringing,
god.
right? So the next year we get to Gauleyfest and we go, we can't have these people ringing this bell. So we go to Walmart. We we buy tubs and tubs of Vaseline, right? And
Uh-uh.
we coat that damn pole in Vaseline.
No.
And we're just go, okay, this is going to be like the squirrel trying to crawl up to the bird feeder, and we're going to watch them slide back down. Well, they slid back down, but eventually they wore the Vaseline out.
No.
Damn bell's still ringing. We did that didn't work. We hire local sheriffs just to be visible so that things can be relatively safe. I mean, my main concern is getting trafficking off the highway and not having
Uh-huh.
things back up, and vehicles are obviously, with a big event like that, a problem. So
Mhm.
the sheriff said, well, look, we know how to fix the bell. We're gonna mace the inside of the cone, and then whoever goes up there to ring it's gonna get this stuff all over them. So
No.
they pull out the ladder, they pull out the mace. One of the guys, sheriff's department, goes up there, starts spraying the inside of the cone with mace. Well, you know what happens when you spray a cone and you're looking down up at it? It just all backwashed on his face. So
So
that was a mess.
did it work at all? Like, did anyone try and, like, get, like,
No,
residual
it did. It
mace?
it 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 didn't work.
Oh my
And
gosh, that's the silliest
the
thing.
poor guy that was trying to spray the inside of the cone, just ended up macing himself, and we had to take him to the hose and just hose the poor guy down, right?
That is so
So
unfortunate.
that's that was another year. And then meantime, this bell's just being rung all night. So the the next night or the next year we just finally, like, put some wood around the ringers, and then the bell didn't ring. It just went conk conk conk, kind of like all night long. Finally, we just had to remove the bell, right? So
No.
the cops are helping us with all of this, and just trying to figure out how to keep the bell from getting rung at like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, to wake that just wakes people up. So, we continue working with the cops, and one of the ongoing challenges has just been, like, really rowdy behavior, um,
Uh-huh.
late at night, like those
Uh-huh.
hours of 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I typically try and get some rest those hours when
Uh-huh.
I can, and you know what happens happens, and hopefully, again, no one gets hurt. But there were folks lighting fireworks off the hood of the cop car at that point. Cops got really agitated, chased them down, and I learned something that evening, and that is, if you're wearing a big down puffy jacket, taser won't hit you. The taser doesn't get through the big puffy jackets. So
Were you
whoever
the
was,
one tased?
oh no, I was asleep. Um, but so the perpetrators, never rematerialized. The cops never got their guy. That morning, the sheriff comes up to me and he goes, you know, I really love this event. You guys have a tendency to come up with the most creative training scenarios for my
Oh
staff.
my gosh. Well, I was just about to say it's like the boaters look forward to it every year, and I just can imagine the sheriff's office is like, it's another year. What's gonna
Yeah,
happen this year?
they've actually,
Wow.
we have some strong partnerships. I mean, I talked to you about the, FERC relicensing and balancing downstream and
Yeah.
upstream recreational use. And, one of the things that went on early on in the early 80s as this was happening is the New and the Gauley River became national recreation areas due to legislation that passed
Oh,
in the
cool.
mid to late 80s. And, with that legislation, Gauley season actually got pushed forward a month. Gauley season used to
Oh,
take place in October. So, you would come off the river in the early 80s, and it was in October, and you could still have really cold weather. So, you'd come off with
mm,
ice on your paddles. And by pushing the season forward with legislation for this national recreation area,
mm-hmm.
um, lake owners felt a little slighted because they lost a month of lake operations. So
Oh,
there was this tension between kind of the boating community, the rafting community that had come in, and the local community who now were having to share their water with downstream users, or that's how they perceived it, right?
okay.
So that tension existed, and it existed, up until the time I became the the executive director of American Whitewater. And one of the things I did at Gauleyfest early on was to hire an economic impact study of
Mm-hmm.
Gauleyfest, just Gauleyfest weekend, not the Gauley
Oh,
season, just Gauleyfest weekend. What does this contribute to the local economy? I
mm-hmm.
mean, we were in a position where we'd have to call up the local Walmart, a couple weeks before Gauleyfest to say, hey, Gauleyfest is 2 weeks out. Make sure you stock up on beer in cans because we don't allow beer in bottles at the event
Okay.
because
Yeah.
bottles break, right?
Yeah.
There are not a lot of hard, fast rules at Gauleyfest, but that's one of them. No glass bottles.
Wait, what are the other ones?
The other ones are no open fires on the grass because it's athletic fields. So if
Uh-huh.
you want to have a fire, it has to be in a fire pan. You can't
Okay,
just build a
nice.
fire on the grass,
But
right?
people
So
can have fires?
people can have fires. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. I'll tell you a story about that.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
Another one. So anyway, this economic development survey was done, and it showed that we were bringing in over the weekend. We were bringing in a couple $1 million to the local economy,
What?
right?
A couple million?
It was, yeah, it was it and it showed the range that people were traveling to get to Gauleyfest, right? Which is
Wow.
like all up and down the eastern seaboard, and then a healthy contingent from Colorado. So,
Colorado.
yeah, so it highlighted how how many people were coming in, where they were coming in. It also highlighted
Mhm.
their demographics. And you think, oh, Gauleyfest is probably just a bunch of 20-year-olds
Mhm.
running around, and it's not. I mean, there's certainly that element, and that's great because
Mhm.
those are all future river stewards. But there's a large majority of people coming in for Gauleyfest are kind of in that 30 to 45 age group. So, and
Interesting.
they have resources, they have money to spend.
Yeah.
So I shared this survey with the Chamber of Commerce and elected officials within Somersville. And the next year, the mayor came out to Gauleyfest. He joined
Really?
American Whitewater. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
They wanted to see what was going on. Cops wanted to see what was going on. So the relationship between the town and the paddling community that's showing up for Gauleyfest and rafting community that's on the river with outfitters,
Yeah.
I think it's really improved over the last 20 years, and
That's
it
amazing.
it has, I mean, it has huge implications for that part of West Virginia, which unfortunately economically it's depressed, right?
Yeah.
Coal is it's an energy source, but it's not it's not the energy source it once was.
Hmm.
And things there are changing, and what replaces it is, there got to be creative solutions for the economy. And adventure-based nature tourism is one of them. And as a
Yeah.
result, you see legislation that passed recently that changed the status of the New River to a national park. The Gauley is still in the national recreation area.
Hmm.
And I do have to say that the staff of the New and the Gauley, they are incredible. They're another link to the community that just does an outstanding job. The river rangers are some of the best you will ever see in the whitewater environment. They're highly trained. They're all super experienced, both rafters and kayakers, and they know where to be, when to be, and they do just a ton of preventive work. So
It's amazing.
it's really cool to see these relationships continue to build and grow.
Hmm.
So getting back to fires,
Yeah, let's go back to fire. Let's hear it.
well, fires are always a bonding thing. Um, there, for many years, if you went to YouTube and you typed in Gauleyfest, the thing the thing that you would see is a group of people standing around a big bonfire, and there is
Hmm.
one designated fire pit there, and that's where
Okay.
this happened. And you will see them chanting, $20, $20, $20, right? And this chant is going on around the fire, and
Uh-huh.
all of a sudden you'll see this shirtless guy sprint through the crowd, do a forward flip, trying to get over the fire,
Oh
but
no.
lands in it, right? So that was certainly a an unplanned ER trip.
Oh
But
my gosh.
fire and crowds. I mean, it's one of the things
I mean,
that
now we're
just
getting into Burning Man territory to join with the Grateful Dead show.
yeah. Well, like I said, Olympic Village and Grateful Dead show. It's a mix. I guess you asked me for a third one, and the third one,
Yeah.
I'm got a little buffering going on. The third one, would have to be Grateful Dead show, Olympic Village, and then conservation and environmentalist. The
Oh
whole
yeah.
stewardship
Yeah.
aspect of what American Whitewater is about. And this is the part that's really important. I mean, the crazy stuff that happens, the stories. I mean, it's it's all fun and games, but
Yeah.
what happens on the river and being able to protect the river. I mean, that's where the real juice is, and as a result,
Yeah.
that's where you see this huge congregation of folks on the river on Gauleyfest Saturday, just having a
Mm.
great time, and however
Hmm.
they want to do it. So it's yeah, it, it's a
Of
thing.
of the people that you see on the river, have you seen anyone beat your 4 stack of rafts with stacking
Oh,
rafts?
I've seen so many things on the river. I've definitely seen people beat 4 stacks on the raft.
What's the
You see,
highest?
oh, I think I've seen as many as 6, but they're kind of cheating because what they're doing is stacking big boats at the bottom, small boats at the top.
Oh,
We we
cheaters.
we had to, we had one size boat. They were all big, and as a result, it was 4, and it was more than we could hold on to.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is this year, 2025, if you go to Gauleyfest and you're listening to this, try to beat the
What's your
record.
stack? What's your
That's
stack?
that's try to beat the record. Okay, with all of the different, I don't even know what should we call them? Olympic events like the boat huck, the splat, the dry flip, the whatever. What ones have you done personally?
You know, like I said, I have a long history on the Gauley, and my paddling goes back to squirt boating in the early '80s. So um, many of these things were squirt moves that came out of that. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, you know, it's not something. It's not. Look, I have no interest in getting hucked off a pillow in a kayak right now. So
Uh-huh.
I enjoy going and paddling, and
Okay, good.
I'll continue to do that. And I think there's a whole new generation out there that would love to get hucked off a pillow in a kayak. And you know what?
Uh-huh.
Good on you, because you should take advantage of every ounce of juice you can pull out of that, because it will be a riot,
Oh my
and
gosh, I love it.
you will look back at it and you will go, yeah, that was my time,
Well,
and
I'm
it'll be
so
great.
excited for Gauleyfest this year. I'm going to make the trek from Washington out. So that's exciting.
Well,
When
good. You and Harris can hook up. You guys will
I
have a
well,
great time.
I know. I think we're gonna my roommate Harris, shout out Harris, love you. Sells a bunch of her work of Harris. Shout out work of Harris if you want cool party shirts, stickers, and very clever river art. Um, but when is it the same weekend every year?
Yeah, yeah. So look, just to keep things simple, third weekend in September every year.
Okay. Third
You
weekend
know,
in September.
and it's yeah, it's the it's the same show. Might be somewhat different rapper, but it's all going to be there. Look,
Okay,
I'll leave
well,
you with one last story, okay? Because I
okay,
think it's
let's hear
important.
it.
I
Let's
think
hear it.
this one's really kind of important given where we are. So obviously, I'm not here to make a political statement, but we are in this really polarized political environment. And one of the things that the Gauley really does is it does bring people together. And as an example of that, uh, early on as the ED for American Whitewater, I was pulling into the dam parking lot, which is where a lot of boaters congregate to get together and meet up with their friends. You know, it's where rafters are putting in. And I parked next to the VW bus with the Grateful Dead sticker, and I pulled in next to the car with the Trump sticker, and I went boating, and I met up with a couple of friends on the water, and one of them was an outfitter manager from the Ocoee River in Tennessee, who was all fired up about this killer marketing plan that he had for his outfitting operation, where he was going to take his outfitter buses and park them at mega churches throughout the Southeast and
Okay.
leave them there on Sundays, through worship. And it was going to be how, he conquered the church youth market for his outfitting operation on the Ocoee. And the other friend that I met up with was someone who is well known as being paddle sports bad boy. Someone who's been involved in multiple kayak brands. Um,
Okay.
known for his rebel rousing, but someone I've also known for a very long time and would consider a friend. And he's telling me about, you know, moving back to Montreal and the paddling that's there, and his smoking hot 23-year-old girlfriend, right? So I'm paddling into Insignificant, which is one of the first class four, significant rapids there in the Gauley. And I got the outfitter on one side telling me about his Christian rafting company business, and I got the paddling bad boy on the other side of me talking about his smoking hot 23-year-old girlfriend, who ultimately, in all fairness to him, he did marry.
Oh,
And
exciting. Good for them.
yeah, it's good. It's worked out. Um, and here I am going between these two guys going, I am paddling into Insignificant. This is awesome. These are two people that I consider friends of mine who couldn't be more different, more probably politically opposite. But
Uh-huh.
we're on the river together and we're having a great time. And that's what
Mm.
the Gauley does. I mean, and that's what public lands and waters have historically done in the United States. So get out, enjoy public lands and waters, take advantage of them. You need to go huck your meat off Pillow Rock, go do it, man. Just do it. And and remember how important these places are to us, part of our shared natural and cultural heritage, and support them. Right, they're under pressure right now. Support
Yeah.
these public places because they're important to many of us, and they create lasting memories. So
Mm.
that's my
Well, I
spiel. That's my
really, I
spiel.
really, I really love your spiel. And I also want to go back to one of the things that you said of, people in their 20s who are the future river stewards. And I just think that's such a good reminder that, if you do go out and you do enjoy what you're doing, with who you're doing it with. It doesn't matter your age or anything like that. It's never too late or too early to get involved with supporting rivers, public lands, etc. And, American Whitewater is a really great way to get involved, and going to festivals and hanging out with your friends is another really great way. So thanks so much for sharing all about Gauleyfest. It's been I'm so excited for this year, and I really hope to see you out there.
Great, Kate. It's been nice talking with you. And yeah, come on out to Gauley. I mean, it's an experience that it's pretty hard to beat.
I can't wait. And enjoy your ski vacation in
Oh,
Jackson.
thank you. I certainly will.
Or I guess in Idaho.
It's other side of Jackson, but yeah, close.
No. All right. Well, you have a really good day, Mark.
Okay, thank you, Kate.
See ya.